Behold, my precious. If you're a fan of the channel, then you know that I love the ASI Air Pro. I have tried the laptop route with all of the various softwares and all of the drivers and all of the cables and all of the everything that a laptop brings with it. And this deck of card-sized box just makes all of that so much easier. But it is not without its faults. One of the biggest complaints of this thing is that it's only compatible with ZWO cameras. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing because ZWO cameras are actually really nice cameras. But if you already have a camera by some other brand, then buying an entirely new camera just so you can use this device doesn't make any sense. But no longer. That's right, the ASI Air line now supports non-ZWO cameras. And I'm going to prove it to you. So to be clear, this does not support all cameras. This is a Panasonic camera that I'm filming this video with, and it did not work. I have an old Canon T4i that it does not work with. That does not surprise me. The T4i is quite an old camera. But this is the camera that I usually shoot my YouTube videos with. It's a Sony a7 III, and it works with this. So knowing that you can take pictures with a different camera, the next question is, should you? How's the user experience? Do the photos come out okay? There's lots of questions, and we're going to break all that down for you here today. I've hooked the Sony up to the ASI Air Pro, and I've taken some pictures, and I'd love to tell you that I got some breathtaking shots of the cosmos, but I did not. It has been cloudy forever. I don't think the sun will ever come out again. I live in Southern California, and we're used to getting like, I don't know, 360 days of sunshine a year. We almost get no rain ever, but this has been the wettest winter that I ever remember. I was excited because the weather app said it was finally going to be clear, so I grabbed my gear, I headed outside, and oh man. Alexa, will it rain today?
No rain is expected today.
Come on. I've got something else to show you. A whole pile of new gear. Yes. It's been sitting in these boxes since before Christmas. Next week is Easter. It's been too cloudy to use any of this new stuff. I've got a new monochrome camera, 3 narrowband filters, and an electronic filter wheel. They have been sitting around for so long that there is quite a substantial layer of dust on all the boxes. They mock me from the corner of the room every day. But the clouds won't part. All right, so here's what we're going to do. I've got the Sony a7 III mounted to a very flimsy tripod. You'll want to get a better one. I'm using my nice tripod to hold the other camera for this video. I've got this clamp. This is from Small Rig, and it's got this other little adjustable arm thing attached to it. I'm going to use this to clamp to the tripod and then hold the ASI Air Pro. So I'm just going to screw this into its 1/4 inch 20 thread mount on the bottom, and then we'll attach the clamp right here. And now this is convenient because I can adjust it any way that I want to. Then we're going to run a USB from one of its ports into the camera. We'll hook up some power, turn it on. And that's it. If I had stars to take a picture of, then I would hook this up to a star tracker as well. You know, you could even throw on a guide scope or anything else. That's the nice thing about the ASI Air Pro is that it can control all kinds of different devices. So if you wanted to, you could hook the camera up just to a telescope, and the telescope could have your guide camera, and you could be using your fancy equatorial mount and the whole 9 yards. The ASI Air Pro will handle all that stuff. Since I have no stars under these cloudy skies to track, I'm just going to take a still photo from the tripod. Now, in order for the ASI Air Pro to recognize this camera, we're going to have to go into the menu and adjust a couple of settings. Now, I've added these settings to my quick access menu because they're things that I often use on this camera, but they're buried in the menu in there someplace. First of all, you're going to need to set the USB connection to PC remote. Now, often when I'm using a DSLR or mirrorless camera like this for astrophotography, I'll like to enable the silent shooting mode because I find that the clicking of the camera creates a little bit of vibration, and that can sometimes result in blurry stars and so forth. However, I've noticed that if silent shooting is enabled, then you can't enter bulb mode on this camera. That's fine as long as the exposures that you're taking are 30 seconds or less, but if you want to take an exposure that's longer than 30 seconds, you're going to need to disable the silent shooting mode. The file format does need to be set to RAW, so no shooting JPEGs. That kind of goes without saying with astrophotography. You should always be shooting in RAW mode. And that's it. Make sure you're shooting in RAW. You might need to turn off silent shooting and make sure that you're set to PC remote settings for your USB connection. The first thing we need to do is connect to the ASI Air's Wi-Fi. We're going to click on the camera icon at the top of the screen. And here's where we can select the Sony camera. See, I told you, Sony Alpha A7 III, PC control, and then we're going to click on the little switch to turn on the camera. Here the app is going to remind us that we need to be shooting in RAW mode, and we either need to be in manual or bulb mode. Because I've disabled silent shooting, I'll be able to access the full bulb settings. So here I'm going to take a picture of my other camera, and we'll do a one second exposure. The photo's been taken and it is downloading that image. Blam! Right there. Now there's all kinds of noise and artifacts and stuff in this. I've found that if it's overexposed, it does that. So we're going to throttle this way back. Let's do 1/10 of a second. Still some artifacts. We're going to dial this back even further. Blam! Look at that. You can't see that, but I'll show it to you. I have taken a picture of a camera with a camera that's not ZWO brand with the ASI Air Pro. That's pretty cool. Now, the question though is this useful? Do I want to be able to do this? If you want to attach your telescope to the camera that you already own, this is useful because this will control your equatorial mount, it will control your tracking, all that stuff. But if you're just going to put your camera on a star tracker and you're only going to use the ASI Air Pro basically as a remote shutter, it does still have utility there, but it's not. There's room for improvement. So here's what I found. You can use a remote shutter release for this. You can use an intervalometer, which will take pictures at set intervals. And those things are cheap. It's just a little remote control thing, and it plugs right into the little shutter release jack, and it's super easy and super fast. Here's one benefit that the ASI Air Pro has over a remote shutter release or even an intervalometer. It's this big screen. The fact that I can see the pictures that I've taken on a larger display means that I can get my focus a little sharper. Now, this camera has a little feature on it where when you are in manual focus mode, it will like digitally zoom in so you can look at your stars and tell a little bit better if you are in focus. I use that feature to get me roughly there, but it always seems like I'm always a little bit out of focus every time I use that feature. And at least for astrophotography. And I don't notice it until I get these computers back to the big screen. That's where I notice that things are out of whack. It looks fine on that little tiny dinky screen on the back of the camera. So I was able to get my stars where I thought they were in focus, and then I used the focus feature in the ASI app to get them even more in focus. With the ZWO astronomy camera, the focusing algorithm is really nice. You'll get to a little star in a little box with a graph next to it, and the graph will tell you how large the star is, and the goal is to make the star as small as possible. When it's as little as possible, then you know it's all the way in focus. So you can do that with this. So you can see a little star, and you can adjust the focus a little bit and take a picture, and it will measure the star. And then you can take another picture and or make adjustment, take another picture, and it will measure the star's size again. The problem is that when you use that focusing feature with this camera, you have to take a picture every time you make a little focusing adjustment. With a ZWO brand camera, it's like a video. It just streams live, and you can just make your adjustments on the fly. You don't have to take a picture and wait and take a picture and wait. But the end result is the same. It gets you there, and I was able to achieve better focus using the ASI Air Pro than I was with just the built-in focusing stuff that's on the camera itself. I have tried putting Batinov masks on this lens. That does not work. I don't know if that works with other cameras, but it does not work with this one. Maybe if I put a Batinov mask on a telescope and had the camera attached to the telescope, maybe that would work and help me get a better focus. But using the lens by itself, just on a Star Trek or whatever focusing algorithm in the ASI Air Pro is better. So my recommendation, ZWO, if you're listening, is if you can find a way to stream the video live through this, the way that you do with the ASI cameras, that would make focusing a lot easier and a lot faster. But I like what you've done here. I like that this is compatible with this device now. I think this opens this up to a larger audience now that it supports other cameras. Now, I had mentioned that this is not yet compatible with this Panasonic camera that I'm using, or a really old Canon T4i camera. However, there is a shutter release cable on the ASI Air Pro. So you could hook that same shutter release port that's on your camera, you could hook that up to the ASI Air and use it as a remote shutter release as well. You wouldn't get the benefit of being able to stream your video to your tablet, so you don't get to see your pictures on the bigger screen and stuff. At that point, I'd say that doesn't really make a lot of sense. Just get yourself an intervalometer or a remote shutter release. They're cheaper and easier to set up. This is normally the part of the show where I show you my amazing astrophotography image, but under the cloudy skies that we've had, this is the best I could do. I was able to use some of the neighborhood lights that were way in the distance, and the app thought that they were a star, so I was able to focus in on those. And it got my focus dialed in a lot better than I usually get with this camera. So I was pleased with that. So I think that there's utility here, and it's worth getting one of these if you've got other devices that you also want to control, like your telescope and your mount and whatnot. So give it a try, and clear skies, clearer than mine, I hope.